In a galactic empire where royal blood is everything, the sudden healing of the dying Princess Zarya should have been a moment of celebration. But when the healer turns out to be a nameless human from a forgotten backwater world, the royal court isn't filled with joy. It's filled with suspicion and fear. This one act of compassion won't save the empire. It's going to plunge it into a brutal civil war, all because of a power they can neither understand nor control. The Kahar Imperium spanned 1,000 star systems, an empire built on rigid tradition and the absolute sanctity of its royal bloodline. For centuries, Kahar emperors and empresses guided their civilization with a wisdom they believed was literally in their blood. Their biology was their destiny, an idea so powerful it had basically become a religion. But now, that foundation was starting to crumble. The entire Imperium was holding its breath, trying to ignore the shadow creeping over the throne. That shadow had a name, the Fade. It was a genetic disease that only affected the royal family, a cruel joke played on their supposedly perfect lineage. It was a slow, unstoppable decay, a draining of life that no Kahar doctor could figure out. And its latest victim was the only heir to the Obsidian throne, Princess Zarya. Her declining health was a state secret for years, just a hushed whisper in the palace halls. But secrets, like sickness, tend to spread. Now everyone knew. The princess was dying, and with her, the direct line of succession. Her father, the emperor, was ancient, kept alive only by the advanced mechanics of his throne. Zarya's death would trigger the rite of contention, a bloody, archaic free-for-all between the lesser noble houses that would tear the Imperium apart. The situation was a political time bomb ticking in the heart of the empire. While warships patrolled the borders to project an image of strength, factions were already forming back at the capital, getting ready for the chaos they knew was coming. Hope was a currency no one could afford, miles away from all the political games and glittering starships. On a forgotten backwater planet called Xylos, a human named Kael was living a quiet, deliberately obscure life. Xylos was a quarantine world, basically a cosmic nature preserve for weird plants and animals the Imperium had deemed too unpredictable. Kael was its human caretaker. His ancestors were part of a failed colonization attempt centuries ago, and their descendants were now tolerated, but mostly ignored. To the proud Kahar, humans were little more than clever animals, short-lived, emotional, and biologically insignificant. Kael, a xenobotanist, spent his days studying glowing fungi and strange creatures. He was a nobody, living on the forgotten edge of a galaxy that was about to be set on fire. He just didn't know it yet. The emergency hit without warning. The Imperial flagship, the Indomitable Will, was taking Princess Zarya to a secret medical facility, a last-ditch effort to find a cure. Suddenly, a freak solar wave, far more powerful than anyone predicted, slammed into the ship. Shields buckled. Critical systems started to fail, including the princess's life support. Alarms screamed through the corridors, a symphony of total disaster. On the bridge, General Vorlag, commander of the Royal Guard, slammed his fist on a console. He was an old-school Kahar, his loyalty to the throne as solid as his armor. His entire life's purpose was to protect the royal line, and right now he was failing. Damage report now, he roared. The reports that came back were a nightmare. The main power core was unstable, the hyperdrive was shot, and worst of all, the princess's medical stasis field was collapsing. She had hours, maybe minutes left. A terrified junior officer pointed to a navigation chart. "General, there's one planet in range of our emergency thrusters. A quarantine world. Xylos." Vorlag's face tightened. A primitive outpost. But it was their only shot. "Set course," he ordered. "Send a Priority 1 distress call. Tell them the heir to the Imperium requires immediate medical assistance." The message that reached Xylos was a mess of static, but the key phrase got through: a royal was dying. The small Kahar administration post on the planet descended into panic. Their medical gear was for scrapes and bruises, not for saving a dying princess. The chief medical officer took one look at the incoming bio readings and felt a chill run down his spine. He told General Vorlag the grim truth: they had nothing that could help. It was in that moment of pure desperation that some low-level staffer mentioned Kael. He wasn't a doctor. The man stammered, but the local humans talked about him. They called him a healer, someone with a strange talent for nurturing life, for getting plants to grow and nursing sick animals back from the edge of death. It sounded like a ridiculous folktale, but it was all they had. General Vorlag listened, his mind at war with centuries of tradition. Letting a filthy, unregistered commoner, a human, even breathe the same air as a royal was a crime punishable by death. To let one touch her, that was blasphemy. But the alternative was to just sit there and watch her die. Protocol, tradition. None of it mattered if the princess was gone. He made a decision that would either save the Imperium or doom it. "Bring me this human," Vorlag growled. Now, a heavily armed skiff screamed towards the planet's surface. They weren't asking for Kale's help. They were demanding it. 1 minute, Kale was tending to a grove of pulsating trees, and the next, a Kahar shuttle descended like an angry god. Armored soldiers surrounded him, weapons raised. They didn't question him. They just grabbed him, hauled him aboard, and told him if he didn't cooperate, they'd turn the entire continent to glass. On the frantic flight up to the flagship, they explained the impossible situation. The princess was dying, their medicine had failed, and he was her last hope. As he was marched through the sterile corridors of the indomitable will, Kale could feel the tension in the air, thick with fear and open hostility. Kahar guards eyed him with pure contempt. He was a dirty little secret in their sacred space. Standing outside the medical bay was High Chancellor Valerius, a tall, slender Kahar whose fancy robes screamed powerful politician. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. "General, what is the meaning of this?" Valerius hissed. "You bring this creature into the royal sanctum? The princess is fading, Chancellor." Vorlag shot back, his voice strained. "Our ways have failed. I will not let her die without trying everything." Valerius glanced from the stoic general to the baffled human. A flicker of something that wasn't concern crossed his face. It was a calculation. He didn't argue further, simply gesturing for them to enter. His silence was more unnerving than any protest. Inside, the medical bay was a cathedral of blinking lights and dying machines. And in the middle of it all was Princess Zarya. She was pale, almost grey, her breathing just a shallow whisper. The monitors showed her life signs flatlining. To Kale, she didn't look like a princess. She just looked like a young woman who was about to die. He ignored all the advanced tech he didn't understand and just walked to her side. The Kahar physicians literally recoiled. Kale closed his eyes, focusing on a strange sense he rarely used, an empathetic connection he had with living things. He could feel it, a cold, parasitic emptiness clinging to her, draining her life force. This wasn't a disease like the Kahar thought. It was a void. Her energy is being consumed, Kale said softly. It's not just fading. Something is pulling it away. Without asking, he reached out and gently placed his hand on her forehead. The room gasped. A human was touching royal blood. Valerius' eyes widened in what looked like fake horror, while Vorlag held his breath, his hand hovering over his sidearm, and then it happened. A soft, golden light shone from Kale's hand, a light the Kahar machines couldn't even register. It wasn't magic. It was a lost biological ability in a tiny fraction of humans, the power to consciously transfer one's own bioenergy. He poured his own life force into her, not as a flood, but as a gentle stream, pushing back against the cold emptiness. On the main monitor, a line that had been dangerously flat started to spike. A weak, then stronger, rhythmic pulse appeared. A faint lavender color returned to the princess's cheeks. She took a deep, steady breath. The Kahar doctors just stared, completely dumbfounded. Their most advanced science had failed, yet this primitive was reversing the incurable with a simple touch. This wasn't medicine. It was a miracle. And in the rigid, scientific world of the Kahar, miracles were just another word for heresy. The silence in the medical bay was broken only by the steady chime of the princess's heart monitor. General Vorlag stared at the readouts, then at Kale, then back to the princess, his mind struggling to accept what he was seeing. The fade, the unbreakable curse of the royal family, had just been broken by a human commoner, but as relief started to wash over him, it was immediately replaced by a new, chilling dread. High Chancellor Valerius looked on, his face a mask of cold fury. This miracle had just ruined whatever plans he had been making. Then, the princess's eyes fluttered open. But something was wrong. Kahar eyes were normally a solid, milky color. Zarya's eyes now had a new, shocking feature, a focused, dark point in the center. An iris, a pupil. She blinked, looking around the room, not at the energy signatures of the people, but at their actual physical forms. She could see. Her gaze landed on General Vorlag, then swept past the guards, and finally settled on High Chancellor Valerius. She physically recoiled. Her first words weren't of thanks or confusion. They were an accusation. "You," she whispered, her voice raspy but clear. She raised a trembling hand, pointing straight at the Chancellor. "Your energy. It's wrong. It's shrouded in deceit. It reeks of the void." She blinked again, her new sight focusing on something beyond him, something only she could perceive. "You can spy with the Shadow Weavers. They're here, hiding in the folds of the Empire." Confusion and horror rippled through the room. Shadow Weavers? Those were bogeymen from Kaha myths, demons said to eat stars. They were children's scary stories, not a topic for the royal court. Valerius saw his chance. He seized it instantly, his voice booming with fake outrage. "Blasphemy! The human has done this. He has not healed her. He has corrupted her." He spun to face the stunned guards. "He has poisoned her mind with his primitive filth and filled her head with forbidden visions. This is not our princess. It is a tainted puppet." He pointed at Kale, who stood frozen in shock. "This is an act of war, a biological attack. The human has used witchcraft to contaminate the royal blood. I, High Chancellor Valerius, declare this human a traitor and this thing." He gestured venomously at the princess, unfit to rule. "Seize them. Purge this corruption." The guards were thrown into chaos. Their loyalties, once absolute, were now split. Some looked at the princess, who was undeniably alive and vibrant, and saw a miracle. Others looked at the Chancellor, the highest political authority on the ship, and saw a terrifying violation of their traditions. Plasma swords hummed to life. Rifles were raised. The pristine medical bay, a room of healing, became a tinderbox of imminent violence. It was a perfect image of the choice now facing the entire empire: embrace a terrifying unknown future, or violently defend a dying past. General Vorlag's mind was racing. Valerius' words were poison, but they were working. Fear of contamination was a powerful weapon. He looked at the princess. Her new eyes didn't look mad. They looked terrifyingly clear. He looked at Kale, the human who had done the impossible. And he looked at Valerius, who screamed about loyalty while, just as the princess had said, his energy felt shrouded and forced. In that split second, the general made a choice that would tear the galaxy in two. His loyalty wasn't to a law. It was to the princess herself. "The princess lives and speaks," Vorlag declared, his voice cutting through the tension. "Her words will be heeded. My allegiance is to the throne, and the throne is with her." He ignited his own energy sword, its crimson blade humming, and planted himself between Valerius and the bed. "To the princess, protect the heir." The room exploded. The royal guard fractured. The guards loyal to Vorlag, a smaller but more experienced group, formed a protective circle around Kale and Zaria. The larger faction, swayed by Valerius and their own deep-seated prejudice, charged. Plasma bolts seared the air. The chamber of healing became a slaughterhouse in seconds. Amid the chaos, Vorlag's loyalists were brutal and efficient, securing the room. But the Chancellor was slippery. Seeing his plan had failed, Valerius and his personal guard escaped through a side corridor, sealing the blast doors behind them. It was too late. An alert flashed on the bridge. An unauthorized transmission was broadcasting from an escape shuttle. It was Valerius, sending a message to the entire empire. His face, a mask of calculated fury, appeared on screens across 1,000 worlds. "People of the Kahar Imperium," he began, "I bring grim news. The heir, Princess Zaria, has fallen, not to the Fade, but to something far worse. She has been corrupted, her mind and body tainted by a primitive alien. General Vorlag, in a traitorous grab for power, has allied himself with this alien witchcraft. He intends to install a polluted puppet on the throne, breaking the sanctity of our bloodline forever." He let the words hang in the air. "I call upon the loyal houses, upon the proud admirals of the fleet. Rise up. We must purge this treason and purify the throne. For the survival of the Imperium, the traitors on the Indomitable will must be destroyed." The response was immediate. The capital world declared for Valerius. Sector fleets, led by admirals who smelled opportunity, pledged their loyalty to his purification movement. The Imperial Civil War didn't begin with a battle. It began with a message, as fleets and planets instantly chose their side. The Indomitable Will, once the pride of the fleet, was now a ship of traitors, alone in hostile space. Kale stood on the bridge of the Kahar warship, a place no human in history was ever supposed to be. The noise of the firefight had been replaced by the chilling silence of their new reality. An hour ago, he was a botanist. Now he was a miracle worker to a few dozen soldiers and a demonic corrupter to the rest of the galaxy. He looked at his own hands, the source of it all, and felt the terrifying weight of what he'd done. Beside him, Princess Zarya stood, wrapped in a general's cloak. She was no longer the frail girl from the medical bay. Her new sight was a terrible burden. As she stared out the viewport, she saw more than just stars. She saw flickers of wrongness, of shadows moving between the worlds, the very shadow weavers she had named. She finally understood. Valerius wasn't just a rival. He was a pawn, opening the gate for a much older enemy. Her healing wasn't a personal miracle. It was a planetary defense system coming online. Her father's empire wasn't just facing a civil war. It was facing an invasion from within. General Vorlag, his armor scarred from the fight, approached them. "The news is as bad as it gets," he said, his voice flat. "The capital has declared for Valerius. The bulk of the Imperial fleet is mobilizing. They have branded us traitors and issued a kill-on-sight order." He paused, letting that sink in. They were a single, damaged ship against an entire empire. "Our allies are few and scattered. We are outgunned and alone." Vorlag then turned, his gaze falling first on the princess, the symbol of their rebellion, and then on Kael, its accidental cause. The battle-hardened general, who had commanded fleets and crushed rebellions, asked a question he never thought he would utter. "Your Highness, human, what are your orders?" The fate of 1,000 worlds now rested on the shoulders of a princess who could see demons and a botanist who could perform miracles. The story has just begun. To see how Kael and Zarya fight back against a galaxy that wants them dead, and to discover the truth of the Shadow Weavers, make sure you are subscribed. Like this video if you want to see part 2, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter of the Imperial Civil War.